It had been years since Peter and Meredith Wood started trying to conceive a child, but they had had no success. It was a roller coaster of emotion, full of letdowns and heartbreak. After a lot of debate and deliberation, Peter eventually agreed to realize the couple's goal of being parents. This was the last option they had, yet it wasn't what they had always had in mind. Despite his reservations, Peter accepted the plan, but deep in his heart he was having a difficult time coming to terms with it. He wasn't sure how he'd feel about it once the baby came into the world. Once Brianna, their little girl, was born, Peter realized he was struggling to form a bond with her. He was constantly plagued by the truth of her genetic lineage. He was starting to feel excluded from his own family. In spite of his struggles, Peter kept up his front, trying his hardest to support his wife and be a good father, but in his heart he felt like the odds were stacked against him. It just didn't seem right to him. And yet he couldn't conceal his hesitation to hold Brianna or try to connect with her from Meredith, who was becoming more and more worried about his attitude. As a result, the Woods household was under immense strain. Any time the infant cried in the night, Meredith was always the one to get up and look after her. Peter simply remained in bed, eyes wide open, incapable of forming any kind of father-daughter relationship. He just couldn't get past it. When Meredith attempted to talk to her husband about it, he simply dismissed her anxieties. He argued that it was just taking him longer to get used to being a father. In the meantime, Georgina, Peter's mom, noticed the tense atmosphere. She then vowed to discover why her son was acting so withdrawn. He had never been like this, and he certainly wasn't behaving like this was the happiest moment of his life. Georgina started discreetly questioning her son whenever she could, asking him how he was feeling about baby Brianna, and then carefully watching how he reacted. Peter soon started feeling the weight of his mother's watchful eyes, and he became increasingly reserved in his relationship with her, as well as with Brianna. He was desperate to hide what was happening in their home from anyone on the outside. But he had no way of evading his mom's watchful gaze anymore. She would just become increasingly concerned about his uncharacteristic demeanor. Her eyes were locked on every move he made when he held the baby. He began to realize that she had taken notice of his weird behavior. This just made it all more overwhelming than before. He felt like he didn't have any chance to breathe. Meredith and Peter had known they wanted to have kids as soon as their relationship turned serious. It was all they ever seemed to talk about, and they decided they wanted to have at least one girl and one boy. But when it got to the point where they were ready to bring children into the world, they sadly had trouble conceiving. In the end, they made an appointment with a fertility specialist, optimistic that they might be able to find a solution. However, after undergoing a few IVF treatments, they were still unsuccessful. Meredith's heart was broken by the disappointment. This hadn't been what they had planned. Fate had sent way too many tragedies their way, and they had reached their breaking point. But then the doctor mentioned another option they could consider. Could it be their saving grace? In the beginning, Meredith had a lot of doubts and couldn't even guess what was going through Peter's thoughts. It wasn't a route they had ever considered taking. And yet, now that the doctor had suggested it, Meredith began to wonder if it was maybe worth a shot. But to Peter, it was an unthinkable possibility. In his eyes, it would be a huge mistake. Meredith persisted, though, her desperation for a child overriding her moral qualms. She pleaded with Peter, arguing that this might be their only chance to have a family of their own. Reluctantly, Peter conceded, but his heart wasn't fully in it. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line, tampering with nature in a way that felt fundamentally wrong to him. The procedure was a blur of appointments, and hope tempered with anxiety. Peter accompanied Meredith to each appointment, trying to be supportive despite his inner turmoil. When the day finally came for the final step, Peter found himself frozen with indecision. It was Meredith who took his hand and led him into the clinic, determination etched on her face. The weeks that followed were agonizing, filled with uncertainty and cautious optimism. Every twinge, every moment of fatigue, was scrutinized for signs that Meredith might be pregnant. When the pregnancy test finally showed positive, Meredith cried tears of joy, while Peter's emotions remained tangled in a web of conflicting feelings. He didn't know if he could be happy about this. Brianna's arrival should have been a moment of pure joy, the culmination of their shared dreams and struggles. Instead, it only deepened the divide between Peter and Meredith. As Meredith cradled their daughter in her arms, Peter stood awkwardly to the side, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He couldn't bring himself to hold the baby, couldn't shake the feeling that gnawed at him from within. He was very happy for Meredith. She was finally content and satisfied. She had the baby she had always wanted, but Peter just couldn't get over his issues. Meredith noticed how withdrawn and distant he had become since the birth of their baby. It was like he wasn't the same man anymore. She felt like she had lost her husband. When their families all came over to see the new baby, Peter tried his very best to be present and interactive. He tried to play the role of a happy father and husband, but it was eating him up inside. And there was one person who noticed this change in demeanor. It was Peter's mother, Georgina. She observed her son throughout and couldn't understand what was happening. He didn't seem happy or excited about the arrival of his precious baby girl. Everyone was over the moon because they knew the struggle that Meredith and Peter endured to get to this point. In everyone's eyes, baby Brianna was a miracle that was sent to them. However, Peter's behavior was worrying, and Georgina wanted to know what was going on with her son. Unable to ignore her concerns any longer, Georgina decided to confront Peter privately one evening after the rest of the family had left. She found him sitting alone in the dimly lit living room, staring blankly ahead. "Peter," she began softly, taking a seat beside him, "I need to know what's really going on. You've been distant, avoiding Brianna, and it's tearing Meredith apart. Please, tell me the truth." Peter's facade cracked, and he turned to his mother, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's nothing, Mom. I'm just finding it hard to adjust to fatherhood," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. However, Georgina knew her son. She wasn't convinced. Something bigger was at play here, and she was going to find out what it was. There was something that Peter wasn't telling her. He was definitely harboring a secret, and she could see that it was tearing him apart inside. But how was she going to figure it out? However, she didn't have to wait long. While Meredith and Peter were putting the baby to sleep in the nursery, Georgina couldn't help but overhear something unsettling. They were talking in hushed tones, but Georgina could just about make the conversation out. "Why couldn't you just pretend to be happy in front of everyone? Just this once," Meredith was saying, but it was what Peter said that made Georgina's blood run cold. "How can I be happy when this baby isn't even mine? I just can't pretend anymore." Georgina's heart sank as she absorbed Peter's confession. She hadn't expected this revelation, and it left her reeling. The implications were profound and troubling. Quietly, she retreated from the nursery, grappling with the weight of what she had just heard. Her mind raced as she tried to process the information. Did this mean that she wasn't the baby's grandmother as well? After a sleepless night spent wrestling with her thoughts, Georgina resolved to confront Peter once more. She couldn't let this secret fester any longer, threatening to tear her family apart. Summoning all her courage, she approached Peter the next morning, her expression a mix of concern and determination. She needed to know the whole truth. "Peter, we need to talk," Georgina began, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. "I heard what you said last night. I happened to be walking past the nursery. You need to tell me everything." Peter's eyes widened in shock, caught off guard by his mother's directness. He opened his mouth to protest, but Georgina held up a hand, silencing him. "I just need to know why the baby isn't yours. Did Meredith cheat on you? If she did, and you want me to forgive her, I will." But it seems like Georgina had the wrong end of the stick. "No, Mom. It's nothing like that. The reason why the baby isn't mine is because we used a sperm donor. It was our only chance, and we took it. I just can't get over it, Mom." Georgina felt horrible for her son. However, she had some wise words for him. Her voice softened with empathy. "I know Brianna isn't biologically yours, but that doesn't change the fact that she's your daughter in every other way that matters." Peter's shoulders slumped, and the weight of his secret finally lifted as he looked into his mother's eyes. For the first time since Brianna's birth, he felt a glimmer of hope. Georgina reached out and enveloped Peter in a comforting embrace. "You're her father, Peter. Biology doesn't define parenthood. It's the love, care, and guidance you provide that make you a dad." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes as he absorbed his mother's words. For so long he had been consumed by his doubts and fears, but now, in her embrace, he felt a flicker of acceptance and understanding. With Georgina's support, Peter began to see Brianna in a new light. She wasn't just a product of science, she was a precious gift, a symbol of their love and perseverance. In the days that followed, Peter made a conscious effort to bond with Brianna, to embrace his role as her father wholeheartedly. This made Meredith very happy. Her family was whole again. Georgina's unwavering support gave Peter the strength he needed to confront his fears and embrace his role as Brianna's father. With her encouragement, he sought therapy to work through his complex emotions and insecurities. As the weeks turned into months, Peter's bond with Brianna deepened, and he found himself experiencing moments of pure joy and pride as he watched her grow and thrive in his care. With each passing day, Peter grew more confident in his ability to be the father Brianna deserved. He realized that while their journey to parenthood had been unconventional, it had brought them closer together as a family. As he looked ahead to the future, Peter knew that no matter what challenges they may face, they would overcome them together, guided by love, understanding, and the unbreakable bond they shared as a family.